please join your hands in welcoming on stage Mr. L.V. Krishnan, CEO for TAM Media Research.
Good morning to each of you all for joining us over here for this amazing third season of the Pride of India brands after Mumbai and Bangalore. It's interesting how things have changed over a period of time, actually. Okay. When I look back in the year 2000, when we started monitoring and tracking campaigns from different brands, the skew that the industry had adopted towards multinational brands was extremely high, to the extent of almost around 70% of marketing budgets were coming in from multinational companies. 22 years later on, we are seeing a completely different picture. So what I'm going to show you is what is happening in a sector which many of the policymakers or probably even corporates don't look at, but eventually what is making the entire industry move in a period of inflation or in a period of depressions, etc., is something very, very, very revealing in nature. So let me head straight into it. Okay. The first question that most of the time I get posed by when I talk to various corporates is, why do you want to focus on an SMB sector? May not be comprising of big players at all, actually. Okay. So I'll answer that question in a few slides. We'll look at evolution of advertising in the SMB sector, how things are changing, specifically in the North markets, and then look at a couple of case studies, just picked up randomly 2 case studies to give you a highlight of how their media strategies are changing in this particular world. If you look at the SMB sector, India is the largest SMB market in the world itself. Okay. It's not just a number, it's actually a sheer market share of SMB sector. The entrepreneurship that exists in this particular country is unmatchable across the world. If you look at the numbers, there are around close to 30 crore SMBs across the globe, across 170 odd countries actually, out of which 20% of them are originating from India itself. And it's still growing. The pandemic obviously pushed it to a bigger level, and now it's growing at around 5 to 6% on an annual basis. It is contributing to 30% of India's GDP actually, which means the fact that you're talking about a GDP of 270 trillion, the SMB sector is contributing to around 81 trillion out of that. So 30% of it is primarily coming from the sector. And it's growing at a faster rate than the GDP rate actually. So their contribution to the GDP exercise is actually growing at 7.1%, which obviously 6.5% of GDP growth. If you look at what is driving them, it's actually new entrepreneurs coming into the fold every year. And if you look at the markets where they're coming from, 52% of them are coming from rural markets actually. Urban and semi-urban markets around 48%. So actually, rural entrepreneurship is actually feeding into the system more and more in nature as years goes by. And what are the 2 things that are contributing? Out of the 4, product, pricing, distribution, and marketing, the 2 big things are primarily distribution and promotion that is provoking the growth unilaterally in the SMB sector. If I look at the advertising space, you have, if I track it from 2019 to 2022, look at the amazing amount of contribution that the advertising sector is getting contributed from the SMB and the MSME sector. 60% of India's ad spends are coming in from this sector itself. Okay. Almost around 45,000 crores of spends actually. And across years, if you look at it, of course, there was a period of depression in the year 2020, and again, the growth started happening in 2021 because of the pandemic. But largely, it's remained stable across all the 4 years. Now, if I break down advertising spends across national brands, regional brands or smaller brands, and the hyperlocal brands, 53% of advertising spend is coming from national brands, but that is coming from 0.02% advertisers actually. So there's a limited handful of advertisers who contribute to that 53%. But if you look at this regional, small, and hyperlocal brands actually,
they almost compose of around 50% of the category, and they contributed to all. So the list is almost around close to 99% contributing to 11% of ADEX from the hyperlocal, and 1% of advertisers contributed to 36% of advertising. So look at the volume that's there in the entrepreneurship level that is slowly inching forward to make bigger and bigger contribution to the advertising levels. So what's happening over there? If you go deeper into it, it's steadily the regional categories that are growing. Actually. When I say regional categories, you're looking at categories like education, food, fashion, home decor, and medical health. Entrepreneurs coming in, starting off entrepreneurship in these particular segments are the largest leading growth factors in this SMB sector. If I look at the print category of media, there are over 70 regional categories that has shown a continuous growth over the last 4 years. So while the world is still talking about inflation, talking about depression in the economy, etc., there are categories that are actually growing in terms of spends continuously. If you look at radio, a sector where advertisers are claiming to be not spending money, there are around 50 regional categories that are propelling growth in the radio sector. And when you look at television, the same top 5 is contributing to the growth among the 30-odd categories that is fueling on a year-to-year basis. Same thing is happening on digital side too. There's a consistent categories that are growing in terms of ad spends and contributing to that platform advertising spends continuously. So if you look at this further microscopically across 85,000 advertisers who are spending less than 50 crores of ad spends on an annual basis, you're seeing 4 big trends actually. One, ad spends of these Bharat brands, what we call it as, is growing at a 255% over 2020 in 2022. If I look at the second one, which is where are they spending it in, it's all regional genres. The regional content is sucking away advertising. Television is still dominating in this particular segment, and to a certain extent, radio is adding on to the fuel of the growth, fueling the growth. Third, hyperlocal advertising is kicking start in regional television, cable TV, even though cable TV has become minuscule in nature, but advertising continues over there. Radio, local radio stations, not Bombay Delhi radio stations, FM stations, it's stations like Nagpur, Aurangabad, etc., which are splurging up in Ludhiana, Chandigarh, which is picking up the advertising spends, and digital, which is localizing advertising and targeted advertising to specific target groups. If you compare for each of the mediums across how things are shaping up between 2022 to 2019, or vis-a-vis 2020 vis-a-vis 2022, or 21 vis-a-vis 22, for all the 4 mediums, TV, print, radio, and digital put together, okay, ad spends have grown by almost around 52% in 2022 vis-a-vis 19. That is a pre-pandemic year. When I compare it against a pandemic year too, okay, for a 2022, the proportion is lifted by around 2.5 times. Okay. And when I look at just last year, when pandemic was dying out and advertising was coming back into the industry, it's grown by another 89% actually. Okay. So therefore, there is a tremendous push from SMB sector to fuel advertising growth continuously. If you break it down to individual TV, print, radio, digital, television has grown by 55% from this sector, from these set of advertisers. Print has declined a bit by around 7, they lost 7% share. Radio and digital, both of them have grown tremendously. So a lot of innovations happening on the digital side, moving from print to digital. Now, if you look at the number of advertisers that is contributing to the growth in each of the 4 mediums, there's a good story coming up, actually. Okay. If you look at TV, the number of categories that have been advertising between 2019 to 2022 has declined. which means the fact that the prices have gone up in terms of tentpole properties, and brands have moved out from that, unable to afford it, are moving on slowly into digital platform or into radio platform. When you look at advertisers, on the other hand, the number of advertisers has shrunk dramatically, okay, largely led from fall in category levels, number of categories, advertising on television. And where have they gone? You see digital climbing up. So there's a tremendous trust on the digital platform by many of the advertisers. It's grown from almost 254 advertisers count in 2019 to almost around doubling it up to 593 advertisers. So therefore, what we see is an equation. While TV still leads significantly for many of the advertisers, okay, at a regional level, there is still radio and digital building up enormous amount of equity with these kind of local advertisers. Their communication length is also shrinking as the year goes by. There's a 35% increase in less than 20-second advertising on television, and there's a 31% increase in less than 20 seconds advertising on radio. So slowly, the messages are shrinking. Brand is getting more and more punched into the consumer's mind with branding, and most of them are dominated with retail sales off. So there's a 50% promotion happening on pricing or discounting happening on pricing that is trying to hive off the products off the shelf continuously. And of course, on television, as I said, regional general entertainment channels are the one which has gained the maximum in terms of revenues. If you look at the markets, which is skewing in terms of various proportion of advertising volumes, you see in television, Tamil Nadu and Kerala and MP, Maharashtra and Assam becoming the top growth markets for television regional markets. If you look at cable in television, that has changed dynamically from pulling in advertisers into the smallest of markets. There are something like around close to the top 10 brands contributing, and another 23 brands contributing to 16% of the volume. So that means there's a long tail of 84% volume coming in from even more smaller brands in each. If you look at categories, so that's categories. On brands, it's a similar story actually, okay, where there are around the top 28 brands contributing to around 14% of advertisers. If you look at print, the big markets again are Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and then down the road comes in your Central India and the North markets. But in each of these markets, what we are seeing is there's a growth pattern that is getting established actually. Okay. While print overall is shrinking and lost money, in certain regional pockets, you're seeing still growth happening in from local advertisers. On radio, again, we're seeing bulk growth in key markets of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Delhi, and AP. So what we did was that we tried to deep dive into a couple of categories and couple of brands and how they have built it over a period of time using media action. Okay. One of the categories we took in was Namkeen snacks. Okay. A heavily, highly competitive category and has over close to 100 odd brands advertising and trying to take share of mind. If you look at their media mix strategy as a category, okay, television dominates actually. Okay. Regional television specifically dominates in a big way. Okay. But between 2019 and 22, there's a 6% share of loss that has happened on television. Where have they gone to? You see the violet digital or the indigo digital, with 7% has gone up to 8% over there. The rest has more or less, print and radio has more or less either remained stable or probably declined. On a year-on-year level, you're seeing TV maintaining at a 100% level, largely, but digital growing by 25%, and radio at a 96%, and print at around 103%. So therefore, while each of the mediums have seen a growth, which was in 2019, the share has changed pretty dramatically. Now here comes the number of advertisers, our competitiveness in that particular category. Okay. You have almost around close to 23 advertisers vis-a-vis 36 advertisers still advertising on television. And where have those loss gone to? It's actually to digital. Your 13 has gone up to around 45 advertisers on the digital side. Now, interestingly, one of the things that we noticed later on it will come up is the mix of digital platforms that they use, actually. Okay. The news genre or the print publications, which has an online channel on digital, also some of the channels that are being used in a big way by these advertisers. So brand pull is a big thing for, or brand pull in media is also a big thing for most of these local advertisers. If you look at the number of brands that are advertising on TV, that's again declined from 53 to 40. But that's almost 5 times grown on the digital side, from a 14 to 81. If you look at the top advertisers in 2022, you see Pepsi holding almost 30% share of the advertising, and then comes the rest of them with ITC and agrotech products coming in a little later. But when you look at print, you see a lot of these local brands that have come up in a big way. Good to Great Industries, Gopal Snacks. Good to Great is the G2 Namkeen snacks. Gopal Snacks, Bikaji, Haldiram, all of them are coming on a continuous basis. So what we did was that we picked up the same thing across radio and digital. We're seeing a lot of local brands, all the national brands also coming back onto digital. So when we looked at this category, we said, let me pick up one brand, Bikanerwala, and see what trends gets plotted out between 5 years back to what it is today. Now, when we look at year 2000, it was such a small organization with hardly around 100 crore turnover, actually. Today, it's come from that to almost a 1,000 crore company. The interesting thing was the kind of revenue growth they have been having since then. And on a year-on-year basis, they have been touching around close between 10 and 30% continuously in terms of growth levels. And today, they are almost around 1,200 crore company. Now, when we look at media, they were hardly advertising. Largely local print and outdoor was what they were advertising in the early 2000s. Today, when we look at it, there are around 122 newspapers they curate their advertising in. There are 24 radio stations across 6 cities. There are 10 regional news channels and GEC channels that they take in, and big tentpole properties too in that. And there are 850 web publishers that they go to. So the scale of advertising has just spread massively in these last 20 years. Between 2018 and 2022, the last 5 years itself, you see massive jumps. In 2018, they were not even on television, actually. Okay? And today, they are almost around 257 times advertising spend is actually happening on television. Print has declined, which was once and outdoor, which was once the key points where communication was happening. That's almost declined by around 66%. Radio, local radio stations, commercials have increased dramatically. And digital, obviously, from a snapshot of around 2,200 odd web publishers in 2018 jumped up to almost twice that. So when we track these kind of behavior patterns, you're seeing leading to massive growth rate in annual turnovers. You're seeing the trend of how these brands are therefore helping overall advertising to build up continuously. Today, Bikanerwala advertises across 4 different categories. And in that, from just being advertising, at 2018 when they were advertising only fast food, that has shrunk to almost 15%. And today, range of product foods and Namkeen are the 2 big categories that most of the advertising is built in. So as they keep expanding, okay, this advertising cost is only going to keep growing continuously. And today, when you look at where Bikanerwala is in the overall standing of 130 odd advertisers that advertises for Namkeen category, they are at number 11, from where they were in year 2000, where they were around 64 in the ranking level. In the fast food outlet, they are at around they are number 23 in a 290 odd brands that are advertising actually in that segment. In a range of food products category, which are around 1,100 odd advertisers, they are at around 39 actually, although the share of advertising is still 1%. Okay. So in a fragmented category like these, okay, they are building the brand, and that brand is being built primarily through advertising. The another case study we picked up was a completely different category, okay, called electric scooters and bikes, which is the upcoming category in the years to come by. Now, this category got launched a couple of years back, that is pre-pandemic, but has been at an ebb level for quite some time, actually. But as the pandemic came in and the government began to give it a push, there are more players that have walked into it, and there is more advertising that's happening in a very, very competitive level, actually. Okay. If you look at the category itself in 2019, compared to the general category of e-bikes and of scooters, they were hardly around 2% share of the market. Okay. Today, e-bikes and e-scooters actually compose of almost 37%. So that's the jump that has happened in just around 4 years' time. The spread of advertising is across platforms, whether you take television, print, digital, or radio in nature. And what is fueling them, actually? If you look at share of television and digital, okay, that's almost, digital is comprising almost 80%. So completely contrast to what you saw it on the Namkeen side. Okay. And if you look at the number of advertisers, in 2019 was just 10. Okay. Really, really safer category from a competitive perspective. Today, there are 63 advertisers fighting for the mind space in the category. And if you look at moving that into television and print almost around 87 advertisers are walking in to grab the space. So therefore, all these categories are getting fueled by smaller and smaller brands. So we picked up one brand for a deeper dive, actually, to see how they are behaving. So among the biggies like a Hero and a Ather, there is a company called Ward Wizard Solution in India, which is doing e-bikes, actually. Okay? The bike name is called Joy e-bike, actually. And look at how things are changing for them. Okay? The total sales turnover in 2022 was around 43, in terms of volume sales, was around 44,000 bikes, actually. Witnessing a 2x growth in their annual turnover. They are a 185 crore company. And when they compare it against 2021, they've grown by almost around 370%, actually. So eventually, these are the brands that are now coming up and taking shape. And here too, advertising has helped them in a massive way. 250 newspapers fighting the battle against competition to make their presence felt. 5 radio stations, 90 odd television channels across news, GCs, and movie genres. And of course, around 1,900 odd web publishers taking together around 40 odd themes of communication that is happening. That's the level of a massive advertising push that the brand has done. When you look at growth rates across, again, the platforms, everywhere the money is getting spent trying to get customers walking into the showrooms and test the bike, trial the bike, and probably make a choice of brand. Today, when you look at each of these mediums, they are fighting against the biggies, as I said. They're at number 9 position from a number 13th position they were in. So they've been increasingly growing that spends. On television, they're number 3 in terms of the share of advertising that they're taking shape. On radio, they're number 11, and on print, again, number 3. So there's an enormous effort that these brands from local markets are pushing itself up and making their presence felt across different markets. At the end of the day, the key takeaways that we feel from the data that we're seeing, okay, is on an average basis, while the advertising industry is still growing at around 6%, 7%, give and take, actually. you have this sector growing by almost 12%, fueling ad growth rates. Today, they almost contribute around 60% of the ad spends from what it was around less than 5% 20 years back. Mix-wise, television, regional television, including local radio, local cable, local or hyperlocal digital campaigns are the key ones that is denting into making their spends happen. And as they scale up, okay, their flow of revenue into national media is going to keep on increasing. When you look at the number of advertisers coming into play in each of these platforms, okay, it's growing by 2x, 3x, 6x on a continuous basis. So we believe the fact that categories like education, food, fashion, home decor, medical health, to list the top 5 out of the 50 or 60 odd key categories that comprises of SMB sectors, is just going through the roof and take this SMB sector into a new level itself in the coming years. If you look at the forecast for Brand of Bharat's, this is how the growth rate looks like actually. Today, we are on this entire category spends around close to 52,000 crores out of the 85,000 crores of advertising spends. In another 3 years' time, they'll be almost in the range of around 75,000 crores actually. Okay. So that's where this category becomes the biggest contributor as well as creator of growth for the entire industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful insights. I would request you to please be with us on stage for another few seconds because we would like to present you with a token of appreciation and gratitude for joining us here this morning. And for the same, I would like to request and invite on stage Mr. Meghraj Dubey, DGM Marketing ABP Network, to kindly join us and felicitate our first speaker this morning, Mr. LV Krishnan, with our token of appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause